Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that. And for the people that do know me and still came, I really appreciate that. Thank you. So, let me just talk about what really birthed the topic that I'm going to talk with you about today. I'm on a number of boards. I've got a number of clients that have me on retainer where I'm in their offices each week. I'm working with their sales teams. I help them hire people. I do training and enablement. I coach on large deals. And there's a really disturbing trend that I've seen in the marketplace, and I'm kind of ashamed to say I've been part of that dangerous trend. Who's heard the term social selling? Social selling's been all the rage, and social is incredibly important. I say to my clients, I won't work with you unless you have Sales Navigator. If you're in B2B selling and you're trying to drive quality pipeline, there's no way you can be serious about that if you don't have Sales Navigator. There's 8.5 million members of LinkedIn in Australia, well over 90% of the white-collar professionals. I would argue almost everybody that matters, maybe some very senior executives, maybe some people in government aren't in LinkedIn. But everybody that we want to get to is there. And the ability to represent our own personal brand really strongly, to start the process of building trust in advance of someone even meeting us and setting an agenda around our insights and values, it's possible for us to do that in LinkedIn. So it's really important, and tools like Twitter are really valuable for social listening. There's an excellent book that was published years ago by Tibor Shanto and Craig Elias called Shift. It's about trigger events. And trigger events are one of the most important things as we go to build pipeline. And the biggest trigger event is often someone changing role. So when someone changes role in an organization, that typically creates an opportunity with a new person coming in that's going to replace them because they've normally been hired to affect change. I know when I was hired as the sales director for a public company in Australia, I was brought into that organization because the perception of the CEO was that the previous person heading sales wasn't getting the job done in the way that the CEO wanted it done. So he brought in a new person, which was me, to effect change. So there was about a 90-day to 120-day window where I could get approval for things to try and change things up in the sales organization. So trigger events are incredibly important. And when that new person comes in, they've typically left somewhere. So now there's another trigger event in that organization that they've left. And often when people change roles, they try and bring relationships with them. So monitoring for trigger events is really important. So social is important for that reason. In Twitter, we can do social listening. There's great tools out there for social listening. We need to build a personal brand. People have always bought from those they know, like, and trust. So the quality of our network and insights all matter. And yet, here's the dangerous trend that I see, and I see this in the USA, I see it in Europe, and I see it in Australia. And even this Monday, I was in one of my clients. I mean, they're every Monday morning. And I chose to go and sit on the sales floor this morning. So I was in there at about 20 to 8 in the morning. And one salesperson turned up at about 10 to 8. The others sort of started to roll in at about 9:15, 20 past 9, which is very worrying. And then I sat there actually working on my next book because I didn't have a meeting in there until about 11:30. So I was just quietly working away. And one of the things that just did my head in as I'm sitting there was in that whole time, not one phone call was made. The rise of the silent sales floor is really killing business. It literally is. And that was the topic of the keynote I did at Salesforce World Tour last week. Who was at Salesforce World Tour last week? Show of hands. Great. So if you saw my presentation there, this is a derivation of it, but we're going to go a little deeper today and actually have some workshops. But it really is killing business because the most powerful digital social selling tool ever invented is what? The telephone. It's absolutely the most powerful. And yet people are neglecting it. When people say to me, what's the best time of day to call? What's the best day of the week to call? I actually know the answer to that question, and I'm not going to tell you the answer, and I don't tell other people the answer. Because if you give them the answer, they use that as an excuse to not call at other times. Right? The truth is, the best time to call is now. So long as you're not invading someone's personal family time, now is the time to call. In my view, salespeople should not leave the office at the end of the day unless they've got a list of 30 to 50 people that they're going to call the next morning. And if your CRM system won't support that process, I know Salesforce does, but if your CRM doesn't, then write it on a sheet of paper. And get into the office, I would say get into the office by 20 to 8, 7:30 to 28, but by 7:45 be ready to be phoning that list. So what you want to do is you want to be on the phone to people with their mobile phone numbers. And there's simple plugins for LinkedIn. I use a product called Lucia. Lucia is an Eastern European name for grandmother. But it's a plugin that does not screen scrape LinkedIn's database. That's an illegal thing to do, and LinkedIn closed companies down that do that. But it ethically sources contact details, mobile phone numbers, personal email addresses. It's been especially used by recruiters in the past. But it's a simple plugin where you can find someone in LinkedIn. You can use Sales Navigator to build a lead list of people in an account. So you might find 13 people of interest in an account. I did this for one of my clients that's targeting Bunnings. Bunnings has thousands and thousands of employees, but in the space of about 20 minutes, we identified all the people that matter in Bunnings. We created an account. We put leads into that account, which are the people. Using Lucia, I could see people's mobile phone numbers. I simply screenshotted that and gave it to the rep so that they could jump on the phone and call people. We need to not be linear in how we're doing prospecting as well. Another trend I see is that people want to phone one person, then they want to wait because they don't want to appear to be pushy. They don't want to appear to be desperate. Then they'll ring them again the next week. You know, they leave 1 or 2 voicemail messages and they don't want to leave anymore. You know, my view is that's all a big mistake. I'll talk about that at the end of today. So this dangerous trend of not getting on the phone, actually neglecting the phone, not using the dulcet tones of our own voice, right? The best way to connect with somebody is obviously face-to-face, and the next best thing to do is to actually have a phone call. That's a thing that I see that's really dangerous. And I just want to really start today by telling you a true story. That's actually my plane. Man, I'm going to sound old, but that was 30 years ago. So I learned to fly ultralights back when they were first introduced to Australia. So they're basically very light, underweight, illegal aircraft powered by things that look like lawnmower engines. So I was part of that movement. We got a distributor who was selling them, and I learned to fly. I had to learn to fly an aeroplane in a single-seat aircraft. That's a bit tricky, right? So you can't go up with anybody as an instructor. My father nearly killed himself trying to do that, and we had 5 aeroplanes we got the distributorship for that we couldn't sell because no one could fly them or demo them. So he taught me to fly without having a 2-seater aircraft. After I could fly, I decided I should probably go to a flight school and learn how to fly a Cessna. So I went solo in club record time because I could already fly anyway, but the instructor was very worried, and this has relevance in business. He was really worried about me going solo. And before he decided to let me loose, he asked me a question. He said, "Tony, what's the definition of confidence?" And I thought about that, and I thought, gee, I think confidence is when skill and experience comes together, then you've got the right to be confident. And he just laconically shook his head and said no. He said, confidence is the feeling you have just before you understand the situation. He said, most dead pilots are dead because they were confident. They were confident that there wouldn't be water in the fuel. They were confident that a wasp hadn't built a nest inside a pitot tube that gives you your airspeeds. They were confident that they wouldn't have an engine problem. So he taught me to always fly on the basis that you're going to have an engine failure. Fly on the basis that you're going to have an engine problem on takeoff. So use all of the runway. All of the runway behind you when you're taking off is of no value to you. Right? Always make sure you've got enough fuel. The only time you have too much fuel on board is if you're on fire. Right? So always have enough fuel. So I did that, and it actually saved my life because I was flying that aeroplane above a pine forest, and in sport aviation you're only allowed to fly at 500 feet, which is anything 500 feet and below is where all the danger is, power lines and everything else. But I flew illegally high above a pine forest because if I had an engine problem I needed to be able to glide. And I did. So I lost my engine above a pine forest and I managed to get out. My father gave me another good definition that saved my life, which was any landing you walk away from is a great one. So don't try and save the aeroplane, just keep it flying all the way into the ground. You might break a leg or something, but you'll be okay. And you know, in business, the analogy is this. We all hear that professional selling is changing. Would you agree with that? You know, CEB's here today, they do amazing research, so we all hear the stats about buyers are 57% of the way through their journey before they decide to contact people, and people are increasingly distrustful. We've gone from sort of 5 to nearly 7 people involved in the decision inside an organisation. Even serious heavy-hitting leaders that are drivers still want consensus in their organisations before they'll go ahead. And it's not sort of 7 people you've got on board, you have to get on board. It's 7 groups of people you have to get on board with competing agendas. And getting a business case funded is incredibly difficult because people don't want to, in their minds, unfairly fund the particular initiative. So you've got to be really good at engineering consensus. And by the way, if you've read the Challenger Sale, I highly recommend that you read Challenger Customer. It's an excellent follow-up book, and it addresses the problem of when you do find a mobiliser, as corporate executive board to term that buyer persona, when you find the mobiliser, The second book, The Challenger Customer, explains how do you go help them achieve consensus and get a business case across the line internally. So we've heard all of these things about selling changing, but tell what happened with my aeroplane is I mismanaged one of my early landings in that aeroplane and I smashed the timber propeller. So I smashed the prop and I replaced the prop. Now what I didn't know at the time was I'd created a hairline fracture in a bolt in the drive system. I couldn't see it, it was invisible. And every time I flew, everything felt normal. It was all completely normal. But under the surface, what I couldn't see was that hairline fatigue fracture was getting worse and worse and worse until one day it just failed. And that's what's happening in business. Who here is involved in selling as a service? So either services as a service or software as a service? Kind of a show of hands. So it's a really good proportion of people in the room. One of the big problems that we have today is that average deal size is relentlessly getting smaller, and yet you'd think buy cycle times would compress, but they're not. There's increasingly more people, more consensus. Even though it's a relatively small decision for the buyer, they still want to go through a very rigorous process. So cost of sale is not being driven down, but average deal size is. And what that means is the average salesperson out there, the average sales organisation is running out of hours in the day that are available to them to go and be successful. I sat down with a rep 2 weeks ago for a big tech company in Sydney, just helping this person with their planning. So they've just started their new fiscal year this month. And he had a look at his average deal size in the last 12 months and compared that with average deal size the 12 months previous, and it's trending down. Had a look at what he could see in his qualified pipe of probable business to close. And then we looked at the gap and we did some simple math. We said, well, let's look at the gap. You need a plan to bridge the gap. How many deals, looking at average deal size, you're going to need to be able to do that? And the number was terrifying. The thing this person has to figure out is how do they drive larger deals? Because you're just being the busy fool if you keep trying to drive the number of transactions at this low value. So these things are slowly going on, and what's happening is average deal size is getting smaller, selling is not getting easier, but salespeople are becoming more passive. And at some stage it's going to break. I'm going to show you some stats today that I think you'll find fairly disturbing. So when I go onto sales floors, you know, this is typically what I see. A lot of people that are screen jockeys and they're clicking away. Now, I think there's one guy there at the end on the right that's holding a phone, I think. No, it's a banana, but. So no one's on the phone, but they're all busy. And this company, I was in there on Monday, same thing. I was there for over 2 hours and I didn't hear one person make a phone call. It's a really common thing. So yes, we need to research, but I think people completely overdo the level of research that they're doing. This increasingly is the scene. Now there's one company, and they're in the room today, so I won't say who they are. I shouldn't say who they are anyway, even if they weren't. But there's one company that's in the room today where salespeople have to go and book a booth if they're going to do any phone calling, because they don't want people being disturbed on the sales floor. Can you believe this? They don't want people being disturbed on the sales floor, so go book a booth if you want to go make phone calls. I think that's insane. I was interviewed 2 months ago by Timothy Hughes in the UK. Awesome guy, he's not a relative. And Tim interviewed me and he told me the story of a potential client he went and visited. They'd taken all of the phones off the sales floor. They'd gone full bottle, 100% all in on social selling. And I said to Tim, that is an act of lunacy. It's a complete act of lunacy. So one of the things I'd like you to take away from today is I think what we need to do is we need to get people out of this kind of passive mindset. I'm researching, I'm posting, I'm sending emails, in-mails, I'm endlessly doing things in social. I'm going to attract and engage a market. I'm going to publish content. Now, attracting and engaging is important. Publishing content is important. But to me, do that outside of core selling time. You know, when there's a concept called the golden hours from Jeb Blount, or Jeb Blount out of the USA in his book Fanatical Prospecting, that he talks about. Treasure the hours we've got available to engage with prospects, because we don't have a shortage of prospects in the marketplace. What we have a shortage of is hours in the day within which we can go and be successful. And if average deal size is being driven down, and if it's increasingly harder to break through the white wall of noise that our buyers face every time they come to work, we need empathy for our buyers. We all know what we face, right? It's the reason this sales floor was quiet for 2 hours is they get in, and what's the first thing we all do? We open up our laptop and we're bombarded with all of this email. Yeah, we think, well, I just need to get through this email and then I can focus on my day. There's a concept called time blocking, which is transformational for people. You turn everything else off and you just focus on the task at hand. So that's one thing that we really need to focus on. I've got a cunning plan today. I want you to do a lot of the work today instead of me. It gets boring listening to me anyway. And I want to ask you this question. How do you create interest? And what I'd like to do is we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to ask us all to stand up, and I just want you to find somebody. I know this will be a little chaotic, so I'll just sort of yell out when we're done and I'll time this. But I want you to stand up and find somebody you don't know, and then you're both going to take a turn at this. One of you is going to say, I'm a prospect, what do you do? And then you've got 1 minute to answer that question. And then what I want at the end of that, I'll say the minute's up, then provide some feedback to the person. So if you were the person who said, I'm a prospect, what do you do? Provide some feedback to the seller and tell them how you think they went in communicating what they did to you, and then you're going to switch roles. Is that clear? So if you can hop up and go and find somebody that you don't know, and I'll tell you when we're going to start. Okay. Did anybody in the room get a prospect out of that? Interestingly, last week at Salesforce, there were about 50 hands went up in the auditorium, which was really quite interesting. Now, what I asked is actually kind of an unfair trick question. We're all wired to talk about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. Do you agree with that? And no matter how much sales training you put people through, no matter how much coaching you give them, and again, I even had this yesterday with a client I was coaching. They're doing a presentation to a big tech company that is going to be a really good customer for them. And they've got the opportunity to present to about 35 of their sales team. And they've got 20 minutes. And this person said, look, would you mind having a look at the slide deck that I'm going to present? Now, I've worked a lot with this person, talking about things that we're talking about in the room today. And he showed me the slide deck. By the way, we need more women in sales, right? So it's always blokes. So, but he showed me the sales deck, and I said, hey, this is all good, but it's the second last slide only that has what's really important. Right? So what the slide deck did is it said this is the company and what we do and all of our lines of services and how it all works and who we are and how long we've been in business and what analysts think of us. But we need to stop leading with who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and instead lead with why. Lead with why a conversation should matter. And we know this from 30 years ago in sales training, right? WWIFM, you know, what's in it for me? I got that acronym wrong, but what's in it for me? Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar and all sorts of people talked about that decades ago. So we need to lead with what's in it for the other person. Why should they care? Why should they invest time in having a conversation with us? So I said that last slide needs to be 2 slides, not 1, and you need to take it right to the beginning. And you need to spend 2/3 of the time talking about, you know, why it matters. Why should they listen to this? Why should they work with you? What problems are you going to solve for them? Have that conversation. And then they'll care about what you do and how you do it, but they're not going to care about that. They're just going to tune out. And you know what? If you tune them out at the beginning, by the time you get to your slides that matter, they're not listening anymore. Right? We've wasted our airtime with somebody. So what we need to do is we need to lead with why a conversation should matter. And the reason that is critical is because narrative matters. In an age where everybody's getting busy in tools, it's very easy to become busy with tools and just be a busy fool. We need to become very effective in how we use tools. If we are perceived to be blasting and spamming everybody in our network, we turn people off us. So who here has heard of Neil Rackham? So Neil Rackham did the best piece of academic research on professional selling. They surveyed over 35,000, they watched 35,000 face-to-face sales calls. It took them nearly 12 years to conduct the research. And what Neil found was that the best salespeople, the top 10% of performers, speak only 1/3 as much as the bottom 90%. So to be a great high-performing salesperson, you talk a lot less than everybody else that you're competing with. But one of the other things that they found is people would try and position benefits in a conversation that weren't benefits at all. And what he said is that a benefit is only a benefit if it solves a specific acknowledged problem that the customer says that they have. Which begs the question, we really need to know what their problems are. We need a hypothesis of value that we lead with. So rather than talking about who we are, what we do, and how we do it, we need to have a narrative that's something like, the reason I want to meet is I'm working with others in your industry, and in doing my own research on your company, I think you have the opportunity to improve in this particular area. That's what I'd like to come and talk to you about. So you don't mention your company or product. An existing customer absolutely will want to meet with us if we think we can address one really important issue, and that is that every CFO, every CEO inside large customers is wanting to get greater value from fewer supplier relationships. They're time poor and they don't want to keep diluting all of their spend. So if you want to break through with a strategy with an existing client, call them up and say, I'm really unhappy with the level of value that you're getting from the relationship with us. Right? I want to come and talk to you about that, because they do want greater value from fewer relationships. If you're wanting to break through with someone who's not yet a client, they care about what's happening in the marketplace with my competition and with other companies that face similar issues to us. They're interested with that. So you don't want to betray the trade secrets of your customers by telling their competitors. I'm not suggesting that. But if you can take some form of insight, it's something that they'll actually want to talk about. So we need to get very clear what really is a benefit. And we need to move away from thinking, from this mindset of the benefit I provide a client, the benefit my sales team provides clients, is the benefit from them buying my solution. That's very natural for us to be wired that way. Before any of that can happen, we need to provide a benefit for them in the conversation. So we need to provide a conversation that's of value to them, whether they buy anything from us at all, ever. And there's been this big push for insight selling. Corporate executive board have taken it to the next level with challenger selling, this whole thing of be politely provocative. The concept of challenging up in Asian cultures can be quite problematic. What I believe is we need a polite hypothesis of value, but it nevertheless still needs to be provocative. Right? So we need an idea of where we think there could be value for this particular client. And if they never buy from us, we want them thinking, wow, that 20 minutes or 40 minutes I had with that person still benefited me. I actually got a whole lot of insight out of that. Most of the insights that people think they're leading with are just factoids, or they're not insights at all. People just roll their eyes and groan. CEB, I hope that don't mind me showing this slide. This is one of their slides, which you can see on the internet. But this was really interesting. So in the Challenger sale, it just shows some of the research that they did, and they surveyed over 5,000 buying organisations, and they said to the buying organisations, when you go to market for a serious purchasing decision, what causes you to select one particular supplier over the other? And they grouped the responses into 4 basic categories. Now, I've heard many salespeople say to me, the reason I'm not being as successful as I want to be and need to be is because our brand isn't strong enough, or what we're offering in the marketplace doesn't have enough intrinsic value. It's not strong enough. Have we all heard that from our own people? Let me tell you that the new battleground for gaining market share, and increasingly for every company in the world today, you win market share at the expense of your competitors. Right? The days of a rising tide will float all boats to the degree that it needs to is just not there. We have to defeat competitors if we want to grow to the levels that we need to. So interesting, what the research found was the first 2 topics there that influence the buyer is brand, and then also the features, functionality, the attributes of what we're selling. So company and brand impact and product and service delivery. So less than 40% of the decision is based on the brand and the attributes of what we sell. What do you think the 53% is? Sorry?
Person they bought from, like the relationship or the trust.
Yeah, exactly. The relationship, the trust, the experience with who they bought from. That's exactly true. Only 9% is price. Now, I don't know about you, but I've often heard salespeople, the reason that we lost that deal was because of price. And usually that's just not true. Price only matters if they want what it is that we offer. The job of the salesperson is to sell strategically by engaging early and starting to provide insights and set an agenda so that they become the emotional favourite. If you're the emotional favourite, the buyer will come back to you and say, look, you're the guys we really want to do business with, but you're really not there. Your pricing's not right. We're going to run a best and final offer process. We've included you on the short list of 3, but you were lucky to get on the list. There were a bunch of people on the buying committee that didn't want you there. Like, you'll get coached by somebody, and there's nothing unethical about that. Right? The buyer's trying to get the best value and lowest risk. So if you are the lowest risk, they want to find a way to do business with you because they don't want to fail a project. So interestingly, price is not as important. And when CEB went deeper, when they said to the buyers, what do you mean the experience that you got or that you had with the selling organisation, it was really those 4 points there. So what they said was the buyer offered a unique and valuable perspective. They helped me navigate all of the alternatives. And that doesn't just mean competitors. Often the alternatives are in-house. So I'm not sure whether you're aware of this, but if you got all of the CRM systems in the world for business-to-business sellers and you ran a consolidated report, and then 12 months later you went back and said, okay, well, let's see how many of those deals were lost, not to a market competitor, but just lost to the customer staying in current state. Lost to customer apathy, the status quo, the do-nothing option. 25% of alleged qualified opportunities are lost to do nothing. The customer ends up just staying in current state. So did they help me understand the alternatives? So when we build a business case, often our business cases in business-to-business selling are really weak because we just focus on the benefits of changing state. What we don't do well is we don't document with numbers the cost of staying in current state. Because what you need in a business case is the risk and the cost of staying as you are is greater than the risk and the cost of changing into future state. We just tend to focus on future state and we assume that they're already committed to change. It's very common for companies to go through the process and do nothing. And then they help me avoid risks or manage risks is really important. So every buyer, especially senior people, it's one of the reasons they want consensus, is they want to manage the risk in their organisation. And if you can be the one that educates them, you'll definitely become the emotional favourite. Now this is another disturbing stat. If you have a look up here, what percentage of engagements do you think failed to meet expectations? So again, they've surveyed buyers and said when a salesperson or sales organisation comes and presents or engages with you, what percentage of the time did they meet your expectations? Were you happy with what they did for you? Any guess on the number? 85 is the number. Steve Hall is a legend, actually. He knows almost everything. 85%. I was being interviewed in the States at the New York radio show a couple of weeks ago, and the guy that ran the show said that all made-up statistics are 76%. So if you ever see 76%, it's probably a made-up stat. But the thing is that 95% of buyers expect insight. If our salespeople are in the mode of let me tell you about our company and our products and how it works, let me navigate you the alternatives of how we operate as a business, that doesn't provide any real level of insight for the buyer. So we have to be able to do that. And 86% of people fail to differentiate. If you grabbed every B2B salesperson in your own organisation and took them to the pub and filled them with wine or beer and then said to them late in the evening, do you differentiate us when you go sell? When you leave a meeting, is the buyer clear about how we're different in the marketplace? Would you agree that everybody would say yes? They go, well, of course, that's a core fundamental thing that a salesperson has to do. I do that well. And yet 86% of the time, people don't actually do that well at all. So what that really leads into is if we want to break through the noise and really build pipeline, to me, it really comes down to three things. The first thing is we need the right narrative, and that's what that little exercise was about before. We need to work with our salespeople. When we hear them on the phone, the best thing you can do as a senior manager, as a sales manager, even as the CEO, is go and work on the sales floor. If you're sitting there and you're not hearing anybody make phone calls, get it fixed. Let's say to them, why is it so quiet? Why aren't we on the phone? Book team calling times in. Say, 2 or 3 days a week. We're all going to be in the office. I'll put on the coffee, I'll buy breakfast, whatever it is. Come into the office. We're going to be on the phones at 7:45. Everybody needs to have a list done before they go home that night. Get mobile phone numbers. We're not ringing switchboards. Get hold of mobile phone numbers. There's simple tools today that can do these things for us. We can get email addresses, mobile phone numbers that are ethical and just break through to people. Don't pick the one person. Don't think, well, my key buyer is the CIO. I just want to get to the CIO and I'll try for 7 months to try and get to the CIO. That's not a good strategy. What you need to do is think, okay, there's 13 people inside this organisation at the CIO, at levels around that person, people in their organisation that will have influence. I'm just going to go at everybody at once. And I'm going to get the right combination of activities I'll talk about in a moment to be able to break through. But when they answer the phone, what we can't be is like a deer in the headlights thinking, oh my God, someone actually answered the phone, right? What am I going to say? We all had that happen, by the way. We're shocked when someone answers the phone. So we need to have the right narrative. The next thing is we need the right combinations. And I'll talk about this in greater detail, but the next book I'm publishing out of the States is going to be called Combo Prospecting, and it's about these combinations. So what we need to do is we need to ring their mobile. We need to leave a voicemail message. If it's the first time I'm contacting them, I would text them as well. Next thing I would do is I would send them an email, right? So it's phone, voicemail, email, a simple combo of 3. But what you need is the right narrative. And it's again, it's that narrative I talked about where I'm working with other companies like yours in your industry, and in researching your own business, I believe you have the opportunity for, or I would like to talk to you about. And you don't mention your company or product, right? So you have something worth talking to them about, and you stay on them. And you might think, man, won't this person think I'm a serial pest? I've published a lot of stuff, but the post that got most read, it's had over 1 million reads, more than 5,000 comments, and people went ballistic, was all I did was I posted a quote from Jeb Blount, who published the book Fanatical Prospecting. And Jeb said in a quote, and this is a true story, that he left the same identical message every day on the voicemail of a CXO for a customer he was trying to sell to, right? So they put a proposal in and they were stalled, and he felt their business case was too weak. He wanted to get to the CXO to have the conversation. As the CEO of his own business, he left the same identical message for more than 50 days on the person's voicemail. And the person phoned him back and said, "You're not going to stop, are you? So here I am," right? And he rang him back. Now, I posted that, and people piled in thinking it was me that had done this, not Jeb, saying that I should be locked up in jail, I should be arrested and go to jail. One lady said that she wanted to hire 2 NFL bouncers to come and rough me up, right? So people just went ballistic. The moment you say pick up the phone and get really proactive, people get really, really negative, and yet it's what we need to do. It's what we need to do. So what I want to do is just at your tables now, inside your packs, you've got one of these sheets inside the packs at the table. So it's Pipeline Creation Workshop. And what I'd like to do is at your table for 5 minutes is I'd like you to discuss how are you ensuring that your sellers are using the best possible narrative for engaging new prospects, and how are you generating real insights? So just at your table, just share some examples of how are you helping them with narrative, because there's no point finding ways to break through if you're not able to have the right conversation. So we'll just go for about 3 to 5 minutes on that. Have that conversation at your table now. Thanks. Can I ask a question? For all of the people in the room, who feels that their company invests in helping salespeople create the right narrative? Wow, okay. Yeah. Steve does that, actually. I'm really serious, actually. So if you want someone to help you create narratives, Steve Hall does do that, right? So what I see is companies are reluctantly investing in tech, in technology and tools, reluctantly, and it's almost at the expense of old school, let's make sure people have exactly the right narrative. So let's just move on. So I think people are losing the art of the narrative. People are losing courage. They're shying away from risking rejection. And I think they're losing the discipline of fanatical execution every day. I know when I first got into sales 30 years ago in the radio paging industry, oh man, I'm old, aren't I? I was there when mobile phones came out. They were $7,000 in 30-year-ago money with no subsidised call plans, right? But I remember when I first got in sales, right, it was all done on paper, but I knew my numbers. I knew how many phone calls I needed to make, how many appointments I needed to do, how many presentations. I would get to every meeting early, so if I got held up, I wasn't late anyway, but I would door knock the neighbours, you know. Hi, I'm just here seeing my client next door is a bit early. Could you tell me who's and it would either be the service manager or the sales manager. So you could get messages to people in the field. This is before phones, right? So with radio paging. And I would get a business card, I'd go back, I would phone them, right? I'd leave a take behind. But I knew if I followed the numbers religiously, unless I was hopeless at what I'm doing, I couldn't help but be successful. And I became the #1 salesperson in that industry ever. Right? And it wasn't because I was a great salesperson. I was crap, but I had a good sales coach who mentored me and helped me get better. And, right, and I learnt, but I outworked everybody else. There were about 120 other salespeople in the company, but it was this thing of numbers. I just thought, I don't care about being rejected. I care more about being successful. And I have almost this religious passion that I'm helping people. The way we should feel is that we are helping our customers achieve a better state. We're saving people's careers. If we can sell our thing to them, our solution to them, we're going to help them be in a far better, have a far better state of affairs in their own business. We're going to progress their own career. I certainly feel that about selling, and I just want to share some stats with you. So one of the problems that we all face, our customers face it today, but also our salespeople, is just this huge array of tools that people use. And the question is, are we really using technology effectively? Because I think most people are failing to. Now, this was an article I wrote that got published in a magazine in America, and I wrote this as a bit of black humor. I try and be sort of the Jason Bourne meets Monty Python of business-to-business writers, but very few people get my sense of humor, especially Americans. Now, what actually happened was a lot of people that read that article thought it was dead serious. So I talked about this coming apocalypse in business-to-business selling, and how most salespeople have to go back to flipping burgers was the line that I used in the article. People took offence, but it was meant to be satire. But this is interesting. So Gartner have done research, and they say that by 2020, 85% of B2B transactions will be done without any human intervention. Now, that's not acquiring a brand new name account, right? But that's still a pretty scary number. When you have a look at research done by Andy Hoare at Forrester, Andy believes more than 1 million salespeople in the US alone are going to lose their jobs by 2020. Right? It's a huge number. And if you look at the cost of transacting online, you can see that there's a real issue. And the reason they'll lose their jobs is because they'll fail to be able to do enough transactions that fund their role. Does that make sense? Everyone would like a relationship, but here's the truth. No buyer worth talking to, not one of them is lonely and bored and looking for a new friend. Not one. And none of them are lying awake at night hoping a salesperson is going to phone them tomorrow and tell them about the joys and wonders of the thing that they're trying to sell them. Nobody. People aren't looking for new friends. We've got to find a way to engage with value and insight. We've got to find a way to break through. Trusted advisor status is absolutely possible. I was doing a training session for Salesforce up in Singapore just before Christmas, 90 of their salespeople, and to their great credit, Salesforce got the CEO of a deal they lost in on day 2 of the sessions that we were running, and that CEO gave a very open view about the basis on which he as a CEO would engage with a salesperson, and gave some very candid feedback. I believe that company is going to be a Salesforce customer actually, still. But, and it was really interesting, and he said, don't shy away from this thing of trusted advisor. He says, I do have relationships with sellers where they are a trusted advisor. They'll guide me on other technologies, right? Because they've earned that status. So you can't begin there. You begin with providing value for the person, and over time you actually build trust. But here's actually the reality. So in Andy's research, where he says 1 million sellers are going to be gone in the US, there was one category where there'll be more salespeople, and that's that top right-hand quadrant. I call it the trusted advisor quadrant, being strategic. Andy calls it consultant, so his definitions are in blue. That illustration's out of my original book. But if you're just an order taker, or you're a relationship manager, or you're a BDM that just competes tactically, and you know that you're having the wrong conversations tactically if you're talking about the competition and your own product, right? You know you're having the right conversations being strategic if you're talking about delivering outcomes and managing risk. Because the language of leaders, the people we want to have conversations with, is want to talk about delivering the outcomes they care about and managing their risk and the numbers that are behind it. The language of business is numbers, is not words. So if we can help people with that kind of narrative, it makes a huge difference. So they're the only people that will actually grow and prosper. And if you think about why, there's 3 horrible forces that are acting on every one of our businesses. There's new technologies that emerge that actually disrupt us. People like Cisco are going through that at the moment with network-defined storage and much cheaper manufacturing out of places like China, which is the commoditization problem. Professional services firms like Deloitte's and all sorts of other organisations are getting offshored. You know, the whole process, I've been involved in some mergers and acquisitions, and you used to pay a lot of money to a law firm to go and, you know, hoover up all of the contracts of the company that you're looking at buying, and they would go through all the contracts and due diligence and look for contingent liabilities and problems and everything else. Now a lot of that's automated. It's all scanned, it's imaged, it's sent offshore. There's technologies that can go and index all of those documents and find the things that are a problem. So it's not even a lot of humans anymore, but the professions are absolutely being disrupted as well. It's not just blue-collar workers and drivers. And almost 90% of chief marketing officers last year were very focused on the battlefield of customer experience being the big point of difference. You don't have to have the best product or service in the market if you can provide the best experience for people that do business with you. And you know, obviously as a case in point, who here saw the launch of the Tesla 3 online last year? Did anybody watch that? Yes, some people in the room. So I don't know whether you were aware of this, but the car industry you think would be one of the last bastions of being disrupted. Because if you're going to buy a car, you want to go look at it, you want to have a drive of it. None of us like being put through the sales process at a dealer, but we go to dealers to look at cars and drive them and as part of that decision process. Now for me, the last 3 cars I've bought, I didn't go to a dealer to make any sort of decision at all. I did my process with emails online, I did all of my research online, and I talked to people that owned cars that I was thinking of owning rather than go talk to a dealer. But the thing that's interesting is this, is Elon Musk is not a particularly great salesperson. He's a pretty quirky guy. He couch surfs, he turns up at friends' houses and stays there for a couple of weeks and then just disappears and goes somewhere else. But he's very passionate about changing the world. He wants to get the human race off the planet. He wants to make us ecologically sustainable, you know, with batteries, wind and solar. He wants to make electric cars cool and fun to drive and sustainable. And he's very passionate about that. He wants to change the world and people buy into it. So when they launched the Tesla Model 3, Elon Musk did an event in California. It was live streamed on the internet. And as a result, just with him talking and having a shopping cart upline, with very vague kind of promises. He said, well, we'll be shipping the car in about 17 months from now. And it'll have this kind of range, this kind of battery life. It'll have similar features to the current Model S in this area. And if you'd like one, you need to shell out $1,000 US. So jump online, fill out a shopping cart and place an order and jump in line. In 18 months to 2 years, you may have a car. Now, he hadn't even built the Gigafactory at this stage, so everyone was saying there's no way they can manufacture enough batteries to be able to meet demand anyway. But he sold $14,000 million worth of cars in 72 hours. That's Aussie dollars, 12 billion US in a shopping cart. And you'd think that people selling cars would be pretty safe. So we can definitely see that the world is changing, yeah? So my real message here is that old dogs really can learn new tricks. Older sellers that have got a good narrative can learn to embrace technology. And the younger millennial kind of sellers can learn to embrace an old school, decent kind of narrative, right, to actually be able to go deeper with people. To me, there's 3 timeless factors that we need to combine with technology. So the first thing is we need to lead with a level of insight. We need to provide value in the conversation. The next thing is we need to build trust with people. And that process for everybody should begin online. Do you know that 3/4 of people that we run any sort of outreach to, so if we leave them a voicemail message or send them an email or a LinkedIn connection request, 3/4 of people will have a look at us before deciding whether they'll engage. And when they look at our LinkedIn profile, what do they see? Do they see Porsche driving, quota crushing Uber salesperson, or do they see industry person of insight that's probably worth meeting with, that's well connected, that has a good network, that's published some interesting things? So it's really important that we start the process of building trust well in advance of actually meeting the person. You cannot be successful in building pipeline and B2B selling if you're not using it well. 8.5 million Australians, as I said, so it's a critically important platform. 2 people join a second. But these are some stats you may not be aware of. C9 in the USA did some research, and what they did with the permission of employees and companies is they got the leaderboard table of performance out of companies, so highest performer to lowest performer in terms of percentage against target, and they snapshotted this over time, over 3 quarters, and they compared people's results with their LinkedIn social selling index score. So LinkedIn run an algorithm on the way you use LinkedIn as a platform yourself, and it gives you a score. I won't go into that today. But they compared that, and what they found was this, is that people who used LinkedIn consistently well were 5 times more likely to secure a meeting with someone they were targeting. So if they were thinking, I need to get a meeting with the CXO of this organization, the ones who used LinkedIn well were 500% more likely to actually get that appointment. So that's an evidence point of why you need to embrace it. The other thing they found was that people who use LinkedIn well built 45% more pipeline, more personal pipeline. So my view is that there's not one salesperson in any of our organizations that is going to be able to achieve their numbers just on marketing leads or the activity of an inside sales or SDR. Would you agree with that? So people have to be good at creating personal pipeline. My view is the CFO in your organization should be thinking about creating pipeline, your CEO should, I know some of the CEOs in this room, and I know you're very active in business development, right? That's what the best CEOs do. They'll use their board to help do business development as well. So everybody needs to do this. And then the other stat is that the people that use LinkedIn well were 51% more likely to make quota for the year. So if you're thinking, how do I increase the probability of me hitting my number? How do I create more pipeline? How do I get a meeting with that important person that I need to drive bigger, higher quality, more strategic deals? The answer is use LinkedIn well. Now, obviously, you need to absolutely use your CRM well, a system like Salesforce, and you need Marketing Cloud as well as Sales Cloud, because if people aren't in the buying window, you need to be able to lead nurture them, and so that those leads don't just go away and actually get forgotten about. So good people will leverage technology. So to me, it's really social and the phone. There's a guy called Kenny Madden in the States that I found, I think he's the first one to coin that term, so I always attribute it to him. But it's the social phone, it's social and the phone. You always use them in combination so that you never have to make a cold call again. Joanne Black actually spoke at our first breakfast out of the States on referral selling, and she's right on. A referral is the fastest path to revenue, and a referral is the highest probability of a sale because it begins with context and trust. It's really important. LinkedIn enables you to do those things really well. So we want to find a common connection that can provide an introduction, actually give us some insight. So what I'd like to do just really briefly now is on the back of those sheets we just had, I just want to skip to topic 3. And what I'd like you to do, so we'll just go to topic 3, just at your tables. The really interesting thing here is that most organisations have got a number of strategies for how they're going to create a pipeline. But if you look at who owns it, who really owns it, there's usually a really big gap. So everyone needs to own the responsibility of creating pipe. It's a fundamentally critically important thing. So just in summary, so we need the right narrative. Don't neglect that. So many organisations charge off with all of these campaigns and activities, get busy in social, but they haven't sorted out their narrative. In your own LinkedIn profile, you need in your summary to not have your work history, but your summary needs to be the value that you provide, the outcomes, the business value that you provide people as the first few sentences or paragraph, and then the next few sentences or the second paragraph are the values by which you operate. So show them how you operate as a person. So you think, well, I want to do business with someone that's all about outcomes, all about managing risks, that has this insight. So we need the right narrative about why a conversation matters is the first thing. We need the right combos. To me, you need Sales Navigator, you need CRM, you need Marketing Cloud as well as Sales Cloud. You need to bring all of the technologies together, right? So you need combos of activity. You need a bit of quick pragmatic research in social. You need to jump on the phone, leave a voicemail, send them a text message initially, not forever. They'll probably find that annoying, but then send an email, send an in-mail, send a connection request. Like, go after people. Don't be so passive, and go after the 13 people in the organisation altogether and see where you start to get traction. If they bump into each other in the water cooler and say, hey, is that Tony Hughes guy been leaving you messages too? That's fine. They'll think, man, this person is determined. And so long as your narrative is right, it'll be okay. If your narrative is naff, then you'll just be an annoying person that they're going to complain about. You need the right narrative, really important. And the last thing is you need the right mindset. We need the mindset of people and technology. There's a lot of fear-mongering going on about artificial intelligence, but let me tell you, the fear-mongering is well-founded. It is real. If you look at what Salesforce have recently delivered with Einstein, the level of predictive forecasting it does is mind-boggling. And the fact it prompts sales reps that their deals are in trouble automatically because they can see the deals at this stage, there's been no contact with this prospect for this period of time because you're logging things in the system, it'll prompt the sales rep. I don't think this deal is going to close. And it's doing this automatically. So Einstein's doing what sales managers often fail to do. Right? There's lots of AI technologies I could go on about, but it's all real. The salespeople that will be okay and will prosper, the ones that move to that top right-hand quadrant and they embrace technology. They become, for want of a better term, a cyborg, right? It's human and it's technology all together. You can't just be human on its own because people are too busy, they're not looking for a friend. You've got to have those insights, and technology can do it for you. It can mine the big data. It can provide the information that gives you the reason to talk to them. And then the other thing is we need to bring sales and marketing together. I think Peter Strokorb's here today. He specialises in really talking about this. But we need, to me, Salesforce, you need Sales Navigator. So Sales Navigator is the pipeline funnel building tool, and then Salesforce is how you're going to manage the entire life cycle through to getting referrals with people as well. But then you need intelligence tools. So I talked about that Lucia tool, the one at the bottom there. That's a simple tool that gives you mobile phone numbers. There's a way of getting the information that you need that's really quick. You don't need to be phoning people's switchboards. And then there's dialing software. It's amazingly productive, this dialing software. It'll automatically log into your CRM and everything well. But they're the kind of things that can really transform the way that you operate. And then the last thing of those three things is really mindset. You know, if you look at Arnie, Nannygate notwithstanding, but he is without doubt one of the most disciplined people that has ever lived, right? Amazingly disciplined. He did not make all of his money out of bodybuilding at all. He made his money out of business, right? And he's been successful in every single venture that he has set his mind to go and do because he's massively disciplined, right? With what he put in his mouth, with the gym work that he did, with the relationships that he had, with the books he read. Incredibly disciplined, and that's what we need in salespeople today. Before they leave the office, at the end of the day, they've got a list of who they're going to be calling in the morning with mobile phone numbers, and they get in and they're on the phone by 7:45, and they make that their habit. That was how I was successful when I first started in sales 30 years ago. You've got to have a work ethic that gets you the numbers that gives you a chance to be success. You can't be snoozing away being a screen jockey, you know, passively doing outreach and about 1/10 of what's really needed and have any hope of being successful. It's really, really important. So please think about what you want to take back into your own organisation from today. Please follow me on LinkedIn. There's a blog post there, The Rise of the Silent Sales Floor is Killing Business. That's basically the notes from today. And also creating an awesome LinkedIn profile has got the video that you were laughing at today. So I've embedded that video there. So in my LinkedIn profile, feel free to connect with me, follow me, and those two posts will actually have all of that information. So with that, what I'd like to do is to invite John back up.
Thank you, Tony.